What's this taste? The dishes you make aren't edible, they're terrible, my husband said suddenly. He asked for the meat and potato stew out of the blue, and I hurriedly prepared it, but my cooking was constantly criticized. Is it just my imagination that the taste is getting worse? Well, because it's a simmered dish, I wanted the flavors to soak in more, and if he had mentioned it since yesterday, I could have made it even better. All you do is cut corners. Even if he says that, I'm not cutting corners. I took the time to make dashi stock from kombu seaweed and bonito fish flakes, and I prepared everything carefully. I'm not cutting corners. I put my heart into it, you know? I had already prepared for breakfast, so I was surprised when he suddenly asked me to make it. But even in the limited time, I did my best to cook, hoping he would be pleased. You always make excuses, don't you? It's really annoying. He took only one bite and left the rest, heading off to work. I had just celebrated my 3rd anniversary with my husband, Tucker. However, for the past year or so, my husband had started complaining about my cooking. When I made deep-fried pork cutlets, I wanted something lighter today. And when I made simmered dishes, the taste is so light that it doesn't feel satisfying. Even though I tasted it and thought the seasoning was just right, it didn't seem to suit his taste. He didn't like my cooking, and he started going to his family's restaurant more often. Initially, when we first got married, he used to say, "It's delicious, delicious," and he ate a lot. My husband was originally reserved, so he might have been enduring it for my sake. I wanted to support my husband in terms of meals and nutrition, but it wasn't going well, and I felt down. Being told every day that the food was bad, I gradually lost confidence in my cooking. I sense that my husband's attitude is getting colder, perhaps because he isn't satisfied with the meals. I no longer know what to make. Once again, the food on the table remains untouched. I was struggling to figure out how to cook something that would make my husband happy. Marley, I received a lot of vegetables from our regular customers, so I'll be delivering them again. One day, I received a call from my mother-in-law. Occasionally, my mother-in-law brings us vegetables and fruits. Thank you as always, Lucy. It's a big help. Everything my mother-in-law gives us is delicious, so I'm sure my husband will like it. By the way, how is Tucker these days? He always comes over to our place to eat and then leaves, so I was wondering if you might be feeling lonely, Marley. Oh, no, I'm not. I was surprised when my husband was suddenly brought up. I didn't want to worry my mother-in-law, but I couldn't explain myself properly. Sometimes, instead of always eating at our place, have some of Marley's home-cooked meals. I've told him that. Actually, I want you to teach me how to cook, Mom. It was difficult to say, but I mustered the courage to ask my mother-in-law. Since my mother-in-law runs a restaurant, she's a cooking pro, and if I learn her seasoning, I'm sure my husband will be satisfied. But I don't think there's anything to teach you. Well, I'll help, so you can come anytime. I was truly grateful that my mother-in-law agreed to teach me how to cook. I remembered how impressed I was when my husband enjoyed his mother's cooking during a visit, and I thought that he would appreciate it if I could make something similar. 1 month later, I had prepared a lot of dishes for my husband's promotion celebration, and I was waiting for him to come home. However, even when it became his usual return time, my husband didn't come back. I became worried and tried calling and texting, but there was no answer. My anxiety grew as I couldn't reach him. 2 hours later, while I was on the phone, I heard a noise from the front door, and my husband returned. I was worried you didn't answer, and you said we'd celebrate your promotion this morning. Even when I spoke to him, my husband sat down looking annoyed. You're annoying. I have social obligations too. Yes, but you must be hungry, right? Here, I made all your favorites. I offered him a meal in the hope that he would be pleased. My husband took a bite of the food, and I watched him closely, waiting for his opinion. Suddenly, my husband stood up and threw the food in the trash. I stood frozen in shock, not understanding what had just happened. The food is awful. Make it again. If the next one isn't good, we're getting a divorce. Unbelievable. He said this food was bad? I didn't know what to do and couldn't say anything. I can't stand you anymore. I stared at the discarded meal, which I had prepared for this special day. Why are you doing this to this meal? Are you going to tell me to eat it with all your heart? Taste is everything in cooking. A wife who can only make such food is useless. I tried to explain, but he interrupted and continued to belittle me. A wife like me was unnecessary? Was he really saying such cruel things? Overwhelmed by shock, tears kept flowing, and I couldn't say anything. Really, marrying a wife like you was a mistake, he spat out, and I couldn't do anything. You, say it again. At that moment, a voice came from my smartphone, and my husband reacted nervously. As it turns out, the person he was on the phone with when he came home was my mother-in-law. Furthermore, we were on a video call, so my husband's misdeeds had all been witnessed by my mother-in-law. Realizing that his actions had been exposed, my husband started to panic. Why? Mom? Do you understand what you did? Perhaps sensing that he was in trouble, my husband quickly became composed and started making excuses. Listen, Mom, Marley's cooking is really terrible and it's a problem. No matter how many times I tell her, she doesn't improve, which is evidence that she's not making an effort. My husband was earnestly pleading with my mother. Perhaps he wanted to shift all the blame onto me and assert that he wasn't at fault. That's why I've been eating at your restaurant lately. Mom, your food is really delicious, you know? My mother-in-law's expression remained stern as she had been listening silently for a while. It seemed like my husband was trying to praise my mother's cooking and win her over. To be honest, I don't want to eat Marley's bad food. I've always wanted to eat your delicious food, Mom. Upon hearing these words, my mother-in-law spoke up. What are you talking about? I'm the one who made the food you threw away. Huh? My husband's eyes widened in surprise, as he couldn't believe my mother-in-law's words. The truth was that the dishes I had prepared for his promotion celebration had been made by my mother-in-law. I had been learning how to cook from my mother-in-law for my husband's sake, but I still felt that I hadn't quite perfected the taste to satisfy him. So, I had asked my mother-in-law to prepare the dishes for today's celebration. I had also set up the video call with my mother-in-law because I wanted her to see my husband's happy reaction. However, this had inadvertently resulted in my mother-in-law witnessing her son throwing away the food right in front of his wife. No, Mom, it's not like that. It's not like that at all. Lately, work has been so hectic, and I've been stressed. My husband began to make excuses, appearing deeply agitated. Since my husband had grown up in a family running a restaurant, he had been taught strictly about food. He likely knew that throwing away the food would lead to a severe scolding. I was just stressed out, Mom. I'm really sorry. Please forgive me." He sincerely apologized to us with a remorseful expression. My husband seemed genuinely repentant, so I couldn't bring myself to scold him. Although he had been returning home late often recently, perhaps it was due to work-related stress. However, my mother-in-law, who had been silent all this time, spoke up slowly. "You want to keep eating my cooking? Don't you actually mean your lover's cooking?" My husband and I were astonished by my mother-in-law's words. Lover's cooking? What does she mean? What is my mother-in-law talking about? Questions were flooding my mind. "What are you saying, Mom? There's no way that's true. Even if you lie, it's futile. You eat at home to see Adeline, right?" "Adeline? Who's Adeline?" "You don't need to know. Just keep quiet." My husband, clearly shaken, shouted. So, was my husband not coming home, but meeting a lover named Adeline? "This Adeline is a regular customer at our restaurant, and about a year ago, you two started acting really close, so I became suspicious." About a year ago corresponds to when my husband started complaining about my cooking. So, does this mean he stopped eating at home because he had a lover? Marley asked me for cooking advice, and her behavior seemed strange, so I had a hunch. I decided to tail Tucker and Adeline. It turns out that Tucker and Adeline were dining at an upscale restaurant, and I realized they were having an affair. It's awful. I had been diligently making food and waiting, and my husband was happily dining with some other woman. It was frustrating, and tears wouldn't stop flowing. "That's a misunderstanding. Adeline was troubled by cooking, so I was just helping her with her inquiries. She said she wanted to eat dishes from a famous restaurant, to study, so we went together." My husband, who knew that his affair had been exposed to my mother-in-law, was making excuses here too. My husband refused to admit the affair, and my mother-in-law delivered the final blow. "For goodness sake, cut it out. I was the one who had been advising Adeline. She told me you were persistently coming on to her." "What? I can't believe it." My husband froze upon hearing that Adeline had been seeking advice from my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law continued with a sigh. "No matter how many times she refused, you kept pushing her, so she got scared and couldn't say no. She was crying, you know." Listening to the conversation, it seemed that Adeline and my husband were not in a mutual relationship. To insist on someone who clearly didn't want to be involved is despicable. I'm truly disappointed that my husband would do such a thing. I believed in my husband, but I can feel the love fading as I'm betrayed. For you, a husband, to approach other women, and even scare the girls, it's really pathetic. No, but because my wife's cooking is bad, it can't be helped that I turn to other women, can it? Come on, you. There's no way Marley's cooking is bad, right? Marley worked as a chef in a high-end restaurant. What? No way. I've never heard a word about that. She worked at the restaurant where you went with Adeline. My husband, who thought of me as just an amateur housewife, seemed surprised by my mother-in-law's words. However, since my husband actually ate there with Adeline, it seemed he understood that my cooking skills were the real deal. Upon realizing that he had been criticizing my cooking, which was based on my professional experience, his face turned pale. That's why, you see, your cooking skills are better than mine. Because you were a professional. So, it seems strange to me that you asked me to teach you cooking. No, you see, home-cooked meals have different tastes from home to home. I just really wanted to make my husband happy, so I wanted to learn from you, Lucy. As my mother-in-law mentioned, the restaurant where I worked was a well-known, high-end place with reservations difficult to get. But I hadn't told my husband that I used to be a chef there. When we met, I had already changed jobs, and besides, I had suffered a lot of harassment from colleagues and superiors. So, I didn't want to remember it if I could help it. Were you criticizing the cooking just to use it as an excuse for divorce? My mother-in-law noticed the contradiction in my husband's words and got straight to the point. My husband fell silent and hung his head, and both my mother-in-law and I realized that her words had hit home. I hadn't been criticized for my cooking because it was bad. My husband had been making up lies to paint me as the one at fault and to push me into a divorce. He just wanted to divorce me and be with his mistress. Something inside me snapped. Are you kidding me? I worked so hard to make food for you, and it was all a lie? Well, I didn't know you had worked at a high-end restaurant. So what? You just criticized my cooking because you wanted to be with your mistress. You're the worst. My husband seemed taken aback by my furious outburst. I had always been calm and had never been angry before. He looked at me yelling, and it left him speechless. All the worry about whether I had gone mad, or whether my taste buds were messed up, or trying different dishes, it had all been for nothing. All my hard work suddenly felt foolish. I won't cook for you ever again. Cooking isn't just about taste. A dish made with love goes beyond taste. You don't understand that. It's over between us. The frustration of having my hard-made dishes belittled is something my husband will never understand. And it was all based on a selfish lie. I strongly felt that I couldn't be with a husband like this anymore. Afterward, my husband and I got a divorce. Since we no longer had any love for each other, the proceedings could be completed quickly. When I spoke to Adeline, she cried and apologized. She was afraid of my husband and didn't know what he might do if she refused him. It became clear that she had no affection for my husband, and Adeline was also a victim in this situation. My husband didn't give up and continued to pursue Adeline, but with the help of my mother-in-law, we filed a stalking complaint with the police. My husband had been relentlessly pursuing Adeline, and he was soon arrested. Are you going back to the world of cooking? I don't know. I've distanced myself from the world of cooking, and I need some time to think about what's next. My mother-in-law inquired, but I'm not in a mental state where I can enjoy cooking again. I'm truly sorry for my inadequate son. If there's anything I can do, I'm here to help. My heart swelled with gratitude for my mother-in-law's words. Indeed, while the taste of the food is important, what's most crucial is that it's prepared with love. Both the cook and the diner should never forget the sense of gratitude, and my mother-in-law and I realized this firsthand.